Well, good evening and welcome to the Choosing Your Uni National Virtual Expo. My name's Rob Malicki and welcome to this session on Murdoch University. Before we kick off, I'm on Gadigal land in Sydney. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, as well as other traditional custodians. Now, before I get started this evening, brain just froze. It's late here in Sydney. Before I get started, thank you so much if you're joining me on the live stream. Any questions, comments that you've got, regardless of where you are watching, if you're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, you name it, you can drop your comments in the chat and they will come through and we'll try to get to those later in the session. And hey, if you are watching this on the live stream, thank you also for watching, and what I'd like to do is just let you know what we're going to be covering in the next 20 minutes or so. So firstly, we're going to be talking about Murdoch University, what it's known for, and who would do well studying there. We're going to hear a little bit about what students say, so hear from some students who've studied there, and we're also going to find out about its academic strengths. After that, we're going to get into some of the hard data that's going to help you understand student satisfaction, employer satisfaction, graduate starting salaries and global rankings. And we're going to get behind the hype and talk about what these actually mean for you. Finally, at the end, I'm going to tell you about some institutions that I would normally compare Murdoch with to help you basically create your shortlist when it comes to choosing a university. So once again, make sure that you drop any questions that you've got into the chat, and if we don't get to all of your questions as part of this session, or if you've got more questions after we're finished, we have the Choosing Your Uni Discord, which is active not only throughout this expo, but also into the future as well. You can get in there and you can ask anything you want about any institution. Broad questions or general questions are all fine. And if you are a parent, we have a Facebook community just for you, Discord for the kids, Facebook for the parents, and you'll find the details of both the Discord and the Facebook right down there below in the session description. Now, before we get started on all of the details, I'd just like to acknowledge our partner sponsor, Southern Cross University. Southern Cross, if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be able to do this expo. And so a quick word from them, and then we're going to get right into the session.
One day soon, I'm going to be the boss.
And I'm going to teach and empower the next generation.
One day soon, I'll use science to save the planet.
And one day soon, I'll save lives.
Right now, I'm ready to take the first step.
No matter what your goal, choose a pathway at Southern Cross University to transform your future.
Here's a number that should make you pay attention. Murdoch University has around 81% of its research areas rated at or above world standard. Now that's a genuinely strong result for a university that most people in Sydney or Melbourne have probably never heard of. So let's get honest about who Murdoch is for and who it isn't for. So let's start with the who it's not for. This institution probably isn't for you if you're like a prestige hunter. If you're chasing that famous degree from a big name university that's research intensive and a group of 8. Murdoch doesn't have that brand recognition, and it doesn't play in the top tier of global rankings. And if that's most important to you, you will find other options even in Perth. It's also probably not for you if you're really hankering for that city vibe, that inner campus experience. Murdoch is about 15 kilometres south of the Perth Central Business District, and you know, I love the campus. It's a big bushland site and it's got a quiet, chilled out vibe, much greener than you'd find at places like UWA or Curtin. So it's not that kind of inner city experience. If you're looking for that inner city experience, you're looking at places like UTS in Sydney, RMIT in Melbourne, QUT in Brisbane, and even ECU's brand new Perth City Centre campus. And if you also feel like you need the highest possible graduate employment rate in order to feel confident about your degree, I do need to flag that Murdoch's numbers on that front actually sit below the national average. Now, there's reasons for that, and I'm going to get into that shortly. But, and here's the important thing, I've started off with all that stuff, but if you're someone who's interested in veterinary science or agriculture, if you're into environmental conservation or health research, Murdoch has genuine depth in those areas that most universities can't match. And if you value a university that takes social equity seriously, and by that I mean like not just in the brochures, but how it actually admits and supports students, then this institution is definitely worth a look. Now, before I tell you what I think about the institution and we dive into all of the details and the stats and everything, why don't we hear from some students who've actually studied at Murdoch and hear what they have to say about their experience.
Guys, tell me what it's like to study at Murdoch Uni.
Yeah, it's really chilled out. Like you can do a lot of the stuff like outside, at home. Like, it's, pretty chilled out. You don't have to put too much like effort in, I guess, in a way. But yeah.
What do you study?
Terrorism and counter-terrorism.
It's a pretty funky little topic. So is Murdoch got like a specialty in that sort of thing?
I know it's a recent. Next year they're changing it was a Bachelor of Arts originally. Now it's changing to its own thing, kind of Bachelor of Global Security.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's getting more specific now, like with its own area.
Nice. What about you, Stephen?
I'm studying marketing and economics, and I find that there's a lot of different ways to study. Like you can either just do it externally or go to lectures. There's a lot of options for you that suit your style of learning, I guess.
What is it for you? What do you prefer?
I prefer a bit of mix.
Yeah.
So maybe like watch lectures online, but I still enjoy that real contact with like the tutors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right, well, those are some perspectives about studying at Murdoch, but it's just one perspective. And I've got more of those to share with you a little bit later in the session. And once again, if you've got any questions or comments as we're going, make sure you drop them into the chat wherever you are watching, and we will try to get to them as part of this session. Okay, there are three things to me that really define Murdoch University. The first is around that genuine specialist or specialisation in agriculture, veterinary science, and environmental research. This isn't a university that offers those degrees as an afterthought. Murdoch has dedicated research farms, animal health facilities, laboratories that are integrated directly with teaching and the like. It's one of only a handful of Australian universities where you can study veterinary medicine, and the agricultural and environmental research is connected to real problems. We're talking about things like biosecurity, crop genetics, livestock health, and conservation biology. So if you're drawn to those fields, Murdoch is a serious contender, and I mean that nationally, regardless of its overall ranking. Secondly, and this is where we come to that equity and access focus. This is embedded in Murdoch's DNA. It's not just something that's kind of bolted on and splashed up in the brochure. Murdoch was founded in the 1970s with a deliberate emphasis on flexible entry and alternative pathways. And that's still the case today. A significant portion of the students who go to Murdoch are the first in their family to go to university. There are pathway and enabling programs for students who don't meet the standard entry requirements, and the university strategy explicitly sets targets around increasing participation from students from regional, remote and low socio-economic backgrounds. For some students, this is exactly the kind of environment where they'll thrive. And if you're thinking about whether university is even possible for you, Murdoch wants to make it possible. Now, I just want to take a little dive off to the side here. If you are one of those people, first in family, from a low, socioeconomic background, and you're wondering if this whole uni thing is even worth it, let me just say to you that going to university is one of the things that opens more doors for you in your life than anything else. The research about outcomes for university graduates is unequivocal. Over their lifetime, a university graduate will earn 50% more than a student that hasn't got a degree. On that metric alone, I would be considering going to uni. But it's more than that. University is this amazing opportunity for you to try different subject areas, for you to experience things outside your normal world. And it's through those different experiences, it's through that trial and error that we actually begin to find things that we love. So access to opportunities outside of your day-to-day come about by going to uni, and that's another reason why it is such an exceptional experience. Now, if you're wondering about how support to make university happens even works, if you're a domestic student, we've got a great session from the Australian Government on Australian Government support for uni studies. It was held on day one of the Expo, and it's available for you to rewatch, to replay right now. The details are down below. You can also find it in the session catalogue for the Expo. We talk all about the government loans, how it works, how to apply for it. It's really worth watching. Now third, the third thing I think really stands out for Murdoch, and that's the campus itself, which actually is a bit unusual in terms of its feel for a city university. It's big, it's green, it's covered in trees and bushland, and the centrepiece is this magnificent building, the Bullacatagen, which is around 16,000 square metres of teaching and learning space, built from mass engineered timber. It's light and airy, and it's a striking place. It's a striking building that houses a lot of day-to-day teaching, but also informal student study areas and services. A couple of good cafes in there too. I enjoy the coffee at the Bullacatagen. And one of the things that's important about this building is that it's built around sustainability. Sustainability isn't just talked about at Murdoch University. The university is really walking the talk. It's committed to carbon neutrality and, I find this very impressive, zero waste landfill by 2030. Nothing going to landfill. That's an extraordinary commitment. Now there's a flip side to all of this. Murdoch is not a university you're going to choose because of nightlife or its inner city buzz. It's a campus that you either drive to or you take the train to, you study on, and probably then you leave. Yes, there's some on-campus accommodation. Murdoch University, in fact, has more than 800 beds, so living on campus is definitely an option, but it's not the same as living in a sort of university precinct in the middle of a city where you've got students coming day and night and it's always kind of humming. Now, for some people, that's going to suit you perfectly. Others might find it a little bit isolating. So you really got to know yourself and what you're looking for. The other thing about the location south of Perth is that it's not far from Fremantle, which is a beautiful, technically a separate city, great place with cafes and nightlife and restaurants and bars, cultural organisations, music, and the most beautiful beaches. So if you want to have that access to those beaches and that life as well, it's not that far from Murdoch itself. There's public transport, the buses that will run to Fremantle from the South Street campus, and there you might get some of those elements that you might be missing on the campus itself. Alright, let's move on to the academic strengths and the research strengths of Murdoch University. Let's get into some of these details. Murdoch structures its teaching through two main colleges. There's the College of Science, Health and Engineering and Education, which covers everything from environmental science to nursing and IT. And then we've got the College of Arts, Business, Law and Social Sciences, which handles, as it might sound, business, law, criminology, good one at Murdoch, creative arts, media and humanities. So within those two really broad colleges, we've got a whole bunch of different separate schools. And these are probably more relevant to you than the broad college structure, which is more organisational. And within these two huge colleges, we've got some real specialist schools. Of course, we've talked about veterinary medicine and agricultural sciences, which have their own dedicated schools. And that tells you something about how seriously the university takes those disciplines. The standout research area for the university is something that you might have not have heard of before. It's called phenomics, and it's the Australian National Phenome Centre. So if you don't know what that is, don't worry, most people haven't. And honestly, I did biology and I hadn't heard of it until I started doing my research around Murdoch. And it's essentially the large-scale analysis of biological samples in order to understand how diseases and environmental factors and genetics all interact. The centre houses one of the biggest collections of high-end mass spectrometers in Australia, and it works. That's basically super specialised equipment, and it works across health, agriculture, and environmental projects. It's literally connected to an international network of similar centres, and for a mid-sized university, this is a significant piece of research infrastructure. Now, beyond that, Murdoch's research strengths cluster around a few clear areas. There's health, and there's work on infectious diseases, medical microbiology, precision medicine, and I think importantly, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health through the Nank Yira Institute for Change. In agriculture, the focus is on crop genetics, livestock health, and food security. So important, food security, and I think in the last couple of months we've seen how important that is as a topic. In environmental science, researchers work on marine megafauna, conservation biology, and climate adaptation. I've met students who've come through the marine bio program at Murdoch and have loved their experience. Now, these aren't obscure academic exercises. They're connected to real industries and real problems, particularly in the West Australian landscape and in the broader Indo-Pacific region. For students interested in the science behind these areas, the Power of Science keynote with Maddie Massey is a great session to add to your list. In fact, I think we renamed that. We actually called it How to Build Your Dream Career. Maddie is a science communicator. I was so excited when we did that session together, and she talks about how you can find something that you really love, like you really care about, and how to build a career around that, even if it seems impossible. It's an absolute standout, and if you're interested in science, then you should definitely check out that session in the recordings. Now, on the teaching side at Murdoch emphasises work integrated learning, which means practical placements and industry projects that are built into your degree. Of course, this is particularly strong in areas like nursing and vet science, counselling, psychology, education, and communication. These are the areas where we typically see a lot of work integrated learning across all institutions. The creative media students, for instance, will work on real briefs with actual organisations. Clinical programs in nursing and psychology include supervised placements in hospitals and in clinical settings, so you can better learn by doing rather than just sitting in lectures. This is maybe a good moment for me to just make an aside that you can once again check out all of the sessions at the expo, link down below, expo.choosingyouruni.com/sessions. We've got over 90 across the whole week, all sorts of different topics. You'll definitely get guidance on all the main things that might be concerning you. All right, the degree structure at Murdoch University is standard for Australia. Most undergraduate degrees last for 3 years for a standard bachelor's degree, which is normal here. There are also double degrees and specialist programs like Vet Science, which run longer. And Murdoch offers pathways and enabling programs if you don't have the ATAR mark, your Australian Tertiary Admissions rank, in order to get into the program that you want. Or there's another alternative, which is if you're coming through TAFE, and that's by going through the vocational education sector and then doing one of the pathways from TAFE into Murdoch, and those pathways are really well established. Just something for me to flag around vet science. We've been talking about veterinary medicine for quite some time as part of this session, and if you are considering it, it's one of the very few programs in Australia, and it's the only one in Western Australia. That means that it has purpose-built facilities, and the research that's going on is incredibly strong. So if vet science is your goal and you're based in WA, it's a no-brainer. Murdoch has to be on your shortlist. In fact, it's your choice. But if you're somewhere else in Australia and you really want to get into veterinary medicine, then Murdoch should be on your list. Let's take a moment now just to have a breather. I'm going to have a glass of water, and while I do that, we're going to hear from another student who's studied at Murdoch University and hear about their experience.
Start with you, Shane. What's it like studying at Murdoch? What do you like about this place?
I like how hands-on most tutors are. Like, I feel like I can just talk to them if I have a problem, and they're very open for a chat.
What do you study?
I'm doing journalism and global communications.
That's kind of cool. What about you, Chanel?
I'm doing business management. So.
Awesome. And what do you like about studying here?
That they're all just like really helpful. Like I can just go to them with a question, and that they usually have like just help in whatever way they can, like resources, anything. Like they're just there.
In a moment, I'm going to take you through Murdoch's performance data, student satisfaction, graduate employments, salaries, and the rankings. And there's a number in here on graduate salaries that I think you might find surprising, given where you'd expect a mid-sized Perth university to land. And there's a graduate employment figure that we need to talk about honestly, because it's kind of the elephant in the room for this institution, so stay with me. The data we're about to talk about comes from the Quality Indicators for Learning and Teaching surveys. That's the QUILT data. It's an Australian government data set that's collected annually, and it's real data from real students who've actually studied at every institution. It's broken down by macro fields of study, so the broad fields of study, as well as by institutions. So as opposed to the big global rankings, this data is Australian, and it's about student experience and employers. So let's look at Murdoch. And firstly, let's talk about student satisfaction. It's probably the big one. And it's 77.4% student satisfaction, which is right around the middle of the pack in Australia. It's not a standout, but it's also not a concern. What it suggests is that most students are having a reasonable experience, but that Murdoch isn't generating the kind of enthusiasm that a small personal institution like Bond Uni or the University of Notre Dame are generating, and those both sit in the high 80s for student satisfaction. You might ask yourself, like, student satisfaction in the 70s, like, how is that even possible? Well, there's lots of reasons for that. We don't truly understand what a degree is all about and a field of study is all about until we start studying it. And the truth is that a lot of people might start a degree and actually not know what the subject's about, and then not change if they're not enjoying that experience. They kind of push through to the end because they've already invested in that degree. My advice is, if you're really not enjoying your experience in a particular program, you need to change. whether that's changing institutions or changing your fields of study. I know you're thinking, I've already committed my time to doing this. Don't. You can always change, and you're better off finding the thing that lights you up and taking a little bit longer to do it than waiting until you're 50 or 60 and suddenly realizing that time's left you by and you missed your chance to be happy in your working life. So always change. Now, let's talk about teaching quality. It tracks similarly, which is around the national average. So Murdoch's competent but not exceptional. However, the uni has been investing significantly in teaching spaces. The Buller Catagen is a big part of that, and the work integrated learning focus is a genuine plus. But what the data says is that Murdoch is doing a solid but not spectacular job in the classroom. Now, when it comes to this data, remember that you can actually go to the Compare Ed website and check out the different fields of study at every institution. So don't just take the top line figure as being the one that's most important to you. Look into the detail. You can also do that via the Choosing a Uni web platform. You can literally go in there and you can just say, hey, compare this uni and that uni for student satisfaction, and you'll get that data. So that makes it really easy for you to explore your options. All right, I mentioned that there was a statistic here that we needed to dig into, and that's the graduate employment rate. And at 67.7% of graduates, students who finish their degree, having a job within 4 months of finishing their degree, it's actually one of the lowest figures amongst Australian universities. The national average sits well above this. So, what does it mean? Well, partly, it reflects the mix of disciplines that's available at Murdoch University. Universities with more generalist humanities, social sciences, and disciplines like that tends to have lower headline employment rates than those dominated by things like nursing, engineering, and teaching. Those last degrees, like you finish your teaching degree, you pretty much have a job. Nursing the same, engineering the same. Of course, Murdoch's professional programs like vet science and nursing and education do perform better individually, but the overall number is something you should factor in if you're looking to do other sorts of degrees. It might also reflect the sort of background of students at Murdoch and its location and what students are going on to do. It may reflect the time period, the amount of time it takes people to finish their degree at Murdoch. But if we move on to the next stat, which is quite interesting, the median graduate salary, so basically like the middle of the pack student, their starting salary after they finish their degree at Murdoch is $71,100. Now, that's really interesting to me because it's actually a reasonable result. It's definitely above several of the more highly ranked Australian universities. And what it suggests is that when Murdoch graduates do get jobs, they're actually getting reasonably well paid. And the ones likely driven by graduates, this is likely driven by graduates in health, agriculture, and some of those other applied fields that are really in demand in Western Australia. And then those other disciplines might come later, might take a little bit longer to get into that full-time employment. Game changer? Maybe, maybe not. It really depends on your personal circumstances. Let's talk about rankings, the global rankings. And Murdoch sits at 423rd in the world. Got to be specific. That's on the QS World University Rankings, which puts it at 24th in Australia. And in the Times Higher Education Rankings, it's in the 400 to 500 range. So Times just basically give a range. And that basically puts it about mid-pack for Australian universities. Now, you've got to remember that these big global rankings pretty much measure things that aren't necessarily relevant to every university. So research is incredibly important. Research output, research citations, how much the research that's created by an institution is looked at by other researchers around the world. There's also this weird criteria which is basically around reputation. It's like if you've got a big name like the University of Melbourne or Sydney, that tends to score highly on reputation surveys because people have heard of it. Has somebody in the Netherlands heard of Murdoch University? Maybe not. In which case, that definitely flows through into the reputational side of those rankings. So those rankings will favour research-intensive famous universities, of course, whereas Murdoch's strengths are in niche areas like vet science, phenomics, and they don't show up well in those big systems designed to rank generalist research powerhouses. So are those global rankings a game changer? Are they a decision factor for me? Honestly, no. Once again, you can compare all those numbers side by side on the Choosing Your Uni platform and decide if that is one of the factors that's important to you. Okay, so you're thinking about Murdoch. Great, there's some really great areas of study. The vibe of the campus is really relaxed. There's a lot of stuff going for this institution. So which institutions should you compare it with? Of course, it depends on your field of study, but let's start by looking at some of the obvious choices. Curtin University is also sort of south and it's actually east of the city centre of Perth, so it's geographically the closest institution along with the University of Western Australia. But Curtin is the most obvious alternative in the sense that not only is it geographically one of the closest ones, but it's bigger, it ranks higher, 183rd in the world, and has stronger graduate employment numbers, which is around 81%. The university is actually also technology focused and it has a very different feel. So if you're weighing up Perth options and you don't have a specific reason to choose Murdoch, like vet science or agriculture or environment, Curtin is possibly the first place to go and compare, in my view. We've got a whole deep dive on Curtin University as well, which you can watch as part of this expo. All right, let me throw you a couple of curveballs. You're thinking about Murdoch, you're thinking about some of those specialist areas like vet science, agriculture, marine biology, for example. So some of the institutions on the East Coast that I would think about would be places like James Cook up in Cairns on the marine side of things. Southern Cross University also has real strengths in marine biology and a whole bunch of areas that overlap with Murdoch. For your agriculture, I'd be looking at universities like the University of Southern Queensland in Toowoomba and Charles Sturt University, which has a footprint around New South Wales. These are institutions that do cover some of those areas. If you're looking for an institution that sort of has that prestige factor, but still has more of a small or a more relaxed vibe, like less pressure, you don't want to be in a big city, then the option to perhaps look at might be Adelaide University in Adelaide, which is the merger of the old University of Adelaide and the old University of South Australia, formed Adelaide University. And it's got an amazing footprint across everything. So your your agriculture, wine sciences, food science, environment, and everything else. So it's a real institute to keep your eye on as well. I think within those sort of options, you're going to find institutions that have similarities with Murdoch, but then also have their own unique flavour. That campus at Murdoch has the kind of vibe of being in a regional area while still being incredibly close to the city. While some of the stats might not necessarily add up compared to some of the bigger institutions, it's got some really niche areas of expertise. And also that focus on equity and access is so critical. Murdoch for decades has been empowering people who will benefit from going to university, and it's been focusing on getting those people not only into uni but through uni as well. Now we're actually at the end of our time, I'm afraid, so I haven't got any time and I've got questions here. I've actually got questions to answer. So if you want to so I'm going to answer all of your questions as well as the questions that came in advance. I'm going to answer those on the Choosing Your Uni Discord. Once again, details in the session down below, and also for the parents in the Facebook community. One last thing, if you're still trying to work out what direction you're even trying to head in, we've got a great session called How to Figure Out Your Next Career Move. It's a keynote and it's a genuinely useful session to help you narrow things down. And of course, the Choosing Your Uni platform is all configured around helping to guide you to the fields of study and the universities that align with you. It's been awesome chatting with you this evening. I'll see you in the Discord community. My name is Rob Malicki. Have yourself a lovely evening. Well, I hope you got something out of this session, and if you have any questions at all, you can head to choosingyouruni.com and ask Lumen. Lumen is your AI guide who knows about every university, every pathway, every option that we've talked about throughout this virtual expo, and Lumen is available to talk to you 24/7, so it's ready when you are.